The Galactic Colosseum of Vreth-Kaul had seen many things in its 400-year history. It had seen the legendary Vorrkai warrior, Vreth-Kaul, tear a battleship door clean off its hinges with his bare hands. It had seen the 8-armed Skalvori champion, Vex, defeat 17 opponents in a single rotation without breaking a sweat, or whatever it was that Skalvori did instead of sweating. It had seen empires rise, warlords fall, and audiences lose their minds in ways that would make even the most seasoned galactic historian reach for something strong to drink. But none of those things, not a single one, had prepared the Colosseum or me, Zorak Ben of the Quellian Observer Corps, for what happened on the 42nd cycle of the Vreth-Kaul Open Championship. None of us had been prepared for her. Her name was Mara Voss. She was human, and she had just been challenged to a duel by Kuldrex-Onn. Let me explain why that sentence alone should have ended with a funeral announcement. Kuldrex-Onn was not just a warrior. He was the warrior. He stood at 3.7 meters tall. He had 12 separate muscle groups that did not exist in any other known species. His species, the Vorrkai, had been evolving specifically for combat since before most civilizations had figured out fire. He had won 49 consecutive championship bouts. His armor was made from the shell of a Vorrkai titan beast, which meant it had survived the deaths of whatever was unfortunate enough to have been inside it before him. His voice alone had reportedly caused structural damage to a shuttle once. And Mara Voss? She was 1.7 meters tall. She had 2 arms. She had 2 legs. She had no armor, just a fitted suit of reinforced tactical fabric that the announcer Heinrichs generously described as combat attire, and that the crowd generously described as "What is she wearing? Is this a joke?" She had brown hair pulled back in a braid that looked like she had done it herself in under a minute. She had a face that suggested she had absolutely no idea what kind of situation she was in, and she was smiling. Not a nervous smile, not an "I am pretending to be brave" smile, not a "please do not hurt me" smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they have already done the math, already checked the calculations twice, and are now just waiting for everyone else in the room to catch up. Kuldrex-Onn had noticed the smile too. He did not like it. I could tell because his crest spines, those magnificent bony ridges running down a Vorrkai's skull that signal emotional state to anyone who bothers to study basic Vorrkai biology, were fully raised. That was the display of someone who expected fear and had received something else entirely, and was now recalibrating with growing irritation. Human. His voice came out like a landslide given a vocabulary. You have entered this competition without permission from any recognized warrior guild. You carry no house sigil. You carry no record of prior combat standing. You are an insult to this arena. Mara tilted her head to one side. Are you done? She asked. The entire stadium went so quiet I could hear my own secondary heart beating. Heinrichs, floating in his announcer's pod above the arena floor, stopped mid-breath. The crowd, 63,000 spectators of no fewer than 40 different species, did not move. A Skalvori child near the front row dropped its food canister, and the clatter of it hitting the floor echoed like a thunderclap. Kuldrex-Onn stared down at her. You dare, he said very slowly, to speak to me as though you are my equal. I dare to speak to you as though you're taking up my time, she replied. Which you are. Are you here to fight, or to make speeches? Because honestly, if it's speeches, I am not the right audience. I skipped most of my diplomatic briefings. I had been a journalist for the Quellian Observer Corps for 22 years. I had covered wars. I had covered the signing of the Vreth-Kaul peace accords. I had once accidentally covered a Skalvori wedding, which took 8 days and involved significantly more tentacles than advertised. In all of those years, I had developed what I believed to be an excellent ability to predict outcomes. I had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. Kuldrex-Onn raised his challenge blade. It was a meter long, edged with Vorrkai titanite, and it hummed with the faint vibration that meant it had been properly consecrated for formal combat. The formal challenge, binding, witnessed, accepted only when the challenged party responded in kind or surrendered. Then fight, he said. Mara looked at the blade, she looked at him, she looked at the blade again. Then she reached behind her back and pulled out something that by every regulation of the Vreth-Kaul Open Championship should not have been allowed inside the arena at all. It was not a blade. It was not a plasma weapon. It was not anything in the approved weapons registry of any of the 47 signatory species of the Galactic Combat Accords. It was a length of something that looked like rope, wrapped in a material that caught the arena lights in a way that was either decorative or deeply, deeply deliberate. And then she held it loosely in one hand, and she said with that same smile, "I am ready when you are." Kuldrex-Onn charged. This is the part where I need to stop and tell you something about Vorrkai charges, because if you have never seen one, you cannot possibly understand the weight of what I am about to describe. A Vorrkai warrior at full charge is not a thing that moves toward you. It is a thing that erases the space between you and it. It covers ground the way a pressure wave covers ground, not by traveling through space so much as by collapsing it. 60,000 years of predatory evolution had produced a creature that, when it chose to close distance, did so with a speed and force that every other species had learned to treat as equivalent to a natural disaster. Voss did not step back. She stepped to the side. One step, precisely timed, and as Kuldrex-Onn's massive frame thundered past her, she moved with it, not against it, and that length of rope that was not rope went around his right arm in a motion so smooth and so practiced that half the crowd did not register it. It had happened until the arm was already going where she wanted it to go. The momentum that Kuldrex-Onn had generated, all of that mass and speed and evolutionary rage, did not stop. It just changed direction. It folded. It went sideways and then it went down, and the sound of 3.7 meters of Vorrkai warrior hitting the arena floor at his own charging speed was something I felt in my secondary heart before my primary heart caught up. The arena was silent again. Kuldrex-Onn was not unconscious. Vorrkai are not built to be rendered unconscious easily. He was, however, face down on the floor, with one arm extended at an angle that was causing his crest spines to flatten in a combination of pain and pure, bewildered shock. Mara stepped back. She let the rope thing go loose. She waited. Kuldrex-Onn got up. This took a while. He was favoring the right arm, but he was upright, and his crest spines had gone from flattened to fully vertical again, which I had never actually seen before. That combination meant something outside the normal Vorrkai emotional chart. The closest translation in standard Galactic would be, "I am going to destroy you and I have not yet decided whether to be calm about it." "Lucky," he said. "Okay," she said. He came at her again. This time he adjusted. He did not charge in a straight line. He feinted left, dropped low, and came from below in a grappling approach that had won him 14 of his 49 bouts. He was going to get his hands on her, and when he did, this was going to end the only way it could end, when a 3.7-meter killing machine wrapped its hands around something 1.7 meters tall. His hands did not reach her. What happened next I watched 4 times in the replay footage before I could construct a coherent description, and even then I am not entirely certain I am right. She did something with her legs. She used his lowered posture as a surface. She went up and over, and while she was over him, the rope thing happened again. But this time it went somewhere that I will simply describe as a place Kuldrex-Onn did not want it to go, and then gravity did what gravity does and Kuldrex-Onn hit the floor again, this time on his back, this time with a sound that knocked dust from the ancient ceiling beams of the Colosseum. He lay there. His crest spines were completely still. In Vorrkai biology, completely still crest spines meant one thing. He was processing something he did not have a category for. Mara stood above him. She was barely breathing hard. She was still smiling. She tilted her head the same way she had before, the same small, patient angle, and she said, "Do you want to keep going, or are we done?" The crowd erupted, not in a way that suggested joy, in a way that suggested 63,000 beings had collectively just experienced something they had not been prepared for, and were now expressing that experience through the only mechanism available to them, which was volume. Henrix was talking very fast. I could not make out individual words over the noise, but his tone was the tone of someone who had written a script for today's events, and was now watching that script on fire. I looked at my recording unit. It was still running. Good. Because somewhere in that crowd, somewhere in that noise, somewhere in the space between what had just happened and what was about to happen, I realized that I was watching something that was going to matter, not just for the championship, not just for this arena, not just for the 47 species who signed the Galactic Combat Accords, or the 39 who did not bother. For everyone. Kuldrex-Onn rose for the second time. His right arm was visibly compromised. His pride was visibly compromised even more. He looked at Voss and said something I did not expect. He did not say another threat. He did not announce another charge. He said, quietly enough that only my long-range audio sensor caught it, "What are you?" And Voss, still smiling, still calm, still standing in the middle of the Vreth-Kaul Colosseum like she owned the floor she was standing on, said, "I am human. We invented patience, pressure and leverage. In that order. Come on, I have got 5 more rounds in me." Kuldrex-Onn stared at her for a long moment, and then, for the first time in 49 championship bouts, Kuldrex-Onn did something completely unprecedented. He sat down. Not in defeat, not in surrender. He sat the way a student sits. Slowly, with intention, like something in him had decided that whatever was happening here was not something to be fought through, but something to be understood. The crowd noise dropped. It did not go quiet. It shifted into something else. A hum, a murmur. 63,000 beings doing the same thing Kuldrex-Onn was doing, which was trying to figure out what exactly they were looking at. Henrix had stopped talking entirely. Mara looked at Kuldrex-Onn sitting on the arena floor. She looked at the audience. She looked at the championship official droid hovering at the edge of the arena, who had clearly not been programmed for this situation, and was emitting a faint distress frequency. She walked to the center of the arena. She sat down too, facing him. "You want to know how I did that?" she asked. The entire stadium leaned forward. Kuldrex-Onn said, "Yes." Mara Voss nodded once. "Then we are going to need to talk about physics," she said, "and about why strength is the least interesting thing in a fight." I pressed record on my secondary unit as backup, because whatever was going to come out of Mara Voss's mouth next was either going to start a war or end one, and I was not going to miss a single word of it. The Vreth-Kaul Colosseum had, in its 400-year existence, hosted coronations, executions, trade negotiations that somehow turned into fistfights, and one extremely misguided attempt at a cross-species cooking competition that nobody talked about anymore. It had never hosted a physics lecture. Until now, Mara Voss sat cross-legged on the arena floor, facing Kuldrex-Onn, who was seated in the way that very large beings sit when they are trying to appear less threatening and not entirely succeeding. The championship official droid had stopped emitting its distress frequency and had instead begun recording, which I took as a sign that even the machinery had decided this was worth documenting. Henrix, the announcer, had finally found his voice again. He said, into his broadcast feed, with the careful tone of someone narrating something they did not understand but were not willing to admit, "And it appears the combatants are conversing. Conversing. Yes, that was one word for it. Physics," Mara said, and her voice carried across the arena floor with the calm confidence of someone who had explained something many times before and had long since stopped being surprised that people needed the explanation. "The thing about physics is that it does not care how big you are. It does not care how strong you are. It does not care about your title, your record, your house sigil, or how impressive your charge looks from the stands." Kuldrex-Onn's crest spines shifted, not aggressively, more like the way ears move when something unexpected has caught attention. "You used my own force against me," he said. "It was not an accusation. It was an observation," stated slowly, like he was turning it over to look at it from different angles. "I redirected your own force against you," Mara corrected gently. "There is a difference. I did not add anything. I did not need to. You were already doing all the work. I just changed where the work was going." From my position in the observer section, I watched the crowd. 63,000 beings, 40 different species, warriors, diplomats, scholars, tourists, arena gamblers who had already lost a significant amount of credit on the outcome of this bout, and were now looking at their empty account displays with expressions ranging from devastated to philosophically resigned. They were all listening, not just the Vorrkai in the crowd, though there were several hundred of them, and their crest spines were doing things I had never seen crest spines do, not just the Skelvori, who had the advantage of multiple sensory organs, and were therefore receiving Mara's words through approximately 4 times the normal amount of biological reception equipment. All of them, every species, every category of spectator, because what Mara Voss was saying was not just about combat, and the 63,000 beings in the Vreth-Kaul Colosseum were smart enough, even the ones who had come only for the spectacle, to feel that in the air. "In my species," Mara continued, "we have a practice called judo. It is at its core a study of how to make the universe work for you instead of against you. The basic principle is this: a system in motion can be guided, a force in motion can be turned. The larger the force, the more potential there is for redirection, which means, and I want to be clear about this because I think it applies beyond fighting, The stronger you are, the more vulnerable you are to someone who understands how to redirect strength. Kuldrex-Onn was very still. You are saying, he said, that my strength was my weakness. I am saying your strength was a tool, Mara said, and like any tool, its value depends on who is holding it and which direction it is pointed. You were holding it, I just temporarily borrowed the direction. There was a pause. Kuldrex-Onn made a sound that in Vorrkai language sits somewhere between a rumble and a concession. I had heard that sound exactly once before, in archival footage of the Vorrkai-Drellin peace negotiations, when the Vorrkai chief negotiator had been presented with an argument he could not defeat and had chosen honesty over stubbornness. It was the sound of a very proud species choosing honesty over stubbornness. You have studied us, Kuldrex-Onn said. The Vorrkai. You came here knowing how we fight. I came here knowing how everyone fights, Mara said. That is the other thing about humans that tends to surprise people. We watch, constantly. We have been watching other species fight since before we had the technology to reach the stars. We watched animals. We watched each other. We have been cataloging movement, force, balance, and reaction time for so long that it is basically built into how we think now. I spent 3 years studying Vorrkai combat records before I registered for this competition. Kuldrex-Onn stared at her. 3 years, he repeated. 3 years, she confirmed. You favor the right side on your initial charge. You drop your left shoulder by approximately 4 degrees before you initiate a grapple. Your recovery time after a redirected impact is 11 to 14 seconds, depending on the surface you hit. I was not guessing out there. I was executing a plan I built over 3 years of watching you specifically. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that has texture. It is not the silence of absence. It is the silence of a very large amount of information landing in a very large number of minds simultaneously. Kuldrex-Onn looked at his right arm. He looked at the arena floor where he had hit it twice. He looked at Mara. I have been champion for 9 years, he said. I know, she said. You are very good. I want to be honest about that because it matters. What I did today was not easy. It required 3 years of preparation for a fight that lasted under 3 minutes. The preparation is the fight. The actual combat is just the confirmation. Kuldrex-Onn's crest spines moved in a pattern I had to look up in my reference database because I had never seen it in a living Vorrkai before. It appeared only in historical records, in descriptions of Vorrkai warriors receiving formal recognition from opponents they considered worthy. It was respect. Full, unambiguous, formal Vorrkai respect. He rose from his seated position, all 3.7 meters of him, rising from the arena floor with the slow deliberateness of something that has decided to change its posture for a reason. He stood, he looked down at Mara, who rose with him at her own 1.7 meters, and looked up at him with the same unhurried calm she had maintained since the moment she stepped into the arena. Then Kuldrex-Onn did something that made Henrix actually drop his broadcast unit. He bowed. A Vorrkai formal bow, head lowered, crest spines folded, both hands open at his sides. A gesture that, in Vorrkai culture, had not been given to a non-Vorrkai in recorded history. A gesture that said, more clearly than any speech, that the being in front of you had earned something that could not be taken back. The crowd did not erupt this time. The crowd stood up, all 63,000 of them. Different species, different anatomies, different ways of expressing the same thing. Some raised limbs, some produced sounds, some flashed bioluminescent markings, some simply stood because standing was the only response their bodies could find for the moment they were in. Mara looked at Kuldrex-Onn. She bowed back. A proper bow, full and clean, the kind that says the respect is mutual and means it. Then she straightened up, and for just a moment, one small, real moment between the spectacle and whatever was going to come next, the smile was different. Not the calculating smile she had worn before the fight, not the patient smile she had worn during it. Something quieter, something that looked, from where I was sitting in the observer section with my 2 recording units and my rapidly accelerating career, like relief. Like she had been carrying something heavy for 3 years and had finally set it down. Henrix retrieved his broadcast unit from the floor. He looked at his screen. He looked at the arena. He pressed the broadcast button and said, with the voice of a being who had abandoned the script entirely, "Ladies, gentlemen, and all recognized forms of personhood across the 47 signatory species, the winner of the 40-second cycle open bout, Mara Voss, human, Earth, and I believe this correspondent is going to need a moment. The crowd laughed. The crowd cheered. The crowd did approximately 14 things at once that I will attempt to describe in my full report, but that I am already certain will require supplementary video evidence, because words alone will not be adequate. I looked at my recording units. Both still running. Good. I looked at the arena floor, where Voss and Kuldrex-Onn were standing in the center of the Vreth-Kaul Colosseum, talking. Actually talking. Not as combatants, not as champion and challenger, as two beings who had just learned something about each other that neither of them had expected to learn, and who were, apparently, not quite ready to stop. I activated my long-range audio. "You should come to Earth sometime," Mara was saying. "We have a training facility in a city called Osaka. My instructor would have a great deal to say about Vorrkai movement mechanics. He has a lot to say about everything, honestly. It takes some patience, but you seem like someone who can be patient when you decide to." Kuldrex-Onn considered this. "Your instructor," he said, "is the instructor like you?" Mara smiled. "My instructor," she said, "is 73 years old, weighs 61 kilograms, and once redirected a Vorrkai security unit that was trying to remove him from a restricted area. The security unit ended up face down on the floor, and my instructor ended up in a chair drinking tea before anyone understood what had happened." Kuldrex-Onn's crest spines rose in the pattern I now recognized as interest. "I would like," he said carefully, "to meet this instructor." "I thought you might," Mara said. And somewhere above them in the announcer's pod, Henrik said, quietly, almost to himself, not quite realizing his broadcast unit was still active, "Nobody is going to believe this report." He was wrong about that. Because 2 cycles later, when the full footage reached the Galactic broadcasting network, when my own report ran in the Quellian Observer Core with both recording units footage attached, when every major news outlet across 47 species ran the same headline in 47 different languages, everyone believed it. They believed it because they had seen it. They believed it because the footage was undeniable. They believed it because Voss had stood in the center of the Vreth-Kaul Colosseum and demonstrated, in under 3 minutes, something that no diplomatic summit, no peace accord and no formal interspecies policy document had managed to demonstrate in 400 years of galactic civilization. That the most dangerous thing in any room is not the largest thing in the room. That patience, preparation and the willingness to understand something before you try to defeat it will beat raw strength on any surface, in any gravity, under any set of rules that the universe cares to apply. That humans, those small, strange, relentless, watching creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable star in the Orion Arm, had spent their entire existence learning exactly that lesson, and they had learned it very, very well. I filed my report that evening from my press unit in the Colosseum's Observer section. I gave it a title, which I normally do not do, because titles feel presumptuous, but this one required a title. I called it, "She Smiled First." The universe should have paid attention. My editor sent back one line. "This is the best thing you have ever written." I looked at the arena floor now empty, lights dimming for the night cycle, the championship brackets being updated on every screen in the building. At the top of the bracket, in clean standard galactic text, were 2 words, Voss. I sat back in my chair. I thought about Kuldrex-Onn's crest spines at the moment Mara redirected his charge for the first time. I thought about the sound the arena had made when 63,000 beings stood up at once. I thought about a smile on a 1.7-meter human's face, patient and ready, and completely unsurprised by its own outcome. I thought about a 73-year-old instructor in a city called Osaka, sitting in a chair drinking tea, who had somehow produced this. I turned off my recording units. I looked at my notes. And I wrote one more line at the bottom of my report, off the record, just for myself. I have been covering this galaxy for 22 years. I have never, until today, seen strength bow to something smaller than itself and mean it. I think I understand now why the universe bothered making humans. They were always going to end up here. We just were not paying attention.